Today I would like to talk to you about the music that I composed for a short thriller called Sweetheart, which is essentially a thriller about a girl named Ginny who has another disastrous Valentine's Day. She's all alone. Her friends are, with their, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, and it's just a disaster. And what happens to her, it's really quite well done. So Chris Wellenbrecht is the director of Sweetheart. I had met Chris some time ago at FearCon, and we had hit it off over the weekend. Really, really bright guy, and really creative, and loves horror, just loves horror. And so he and I hit it off really well, and of course everybody's busy, but we sparsely stayed in touch. And then I saw a short film of his at a film bar here in Phoenix, and it was just great. And I had thought, man, I really want to work with that guy. And so what happened is that Chris actually had the film done, and he was trying to wrap things up, and he couldn't get things done as quickly as he wanted. And he wound up calling me, and it was kind of a last minute thing. And then we kind of talked about some ideas, and I think after I saw it, I said, oh yeah, I really want to do this, because it's really old school. It's almost like Alfred Hitchcock, meets Christine meets Phantasm. I mean, it's really a good story. It's not your typical horror story, and it's kind of a throwback to the way that things used to be made. And so Chris and I talked about the characters. We talked about the story. We talked about the story behind the characters a little bit. We talked about what he was looking for so far as in sound, and how he wanted the music to drive the movie a little bit, because the role of the music in a sense is to give the movie a little bit of energy and to provide some extra energy. And the role of music is different for every film that you work on. In this particular one, we felt like that was a really good thing to do. So we just went over some things, and then I got to work trying to find a tone. And once we had the tone that we both agreed on, then I could actually get to work on the film. So the first thing that really stuck out to me doing this short film was the car. A big, heavy, real metal V8 engine, churning, chugging car. And, it just reminded me of a lot of old movies that I had watched, and where you saw big cars in that were really cool, and the thing is just sinister. And so, I approached it with, I could just hear it in my head, these big heavy strings underneath, just kind of weaving in and out, and almost like the wheels turning slowly, like it's coming through your neighborhood, kind of like you don't know who's driving this car. You can't see the driver, it's dark, but it's creepy, and whatever's inside is not good. And so I really focused on big bottom strings with swells, and like I said, just kind of weaving in and out to kind of give that feel like the music was kind of underneath the car, rolling along the car, almost like a fog, or it was just something that was heavy and dense. And so that's the way I wanted to really approach the car in this film. So the next thing that really struck me was the driver. The driver is played by John Sipple, and he does it brilliantly. It's really a throwback to old creepy characters that you would see in movies. I mean, almost like Lon Chaney style, and it was awesome. I loved his performance, and so he is the driver, and he's in this big car, and the cars already were kind of embodied by those low strings, and so but I almost felt like he was an extension of that car, in some ways. I mean, he and that car were one in a lot of ways, and so uh, I just kind of rose up a little bit with the strings, because I wanted to give the feel that he was connected to that car, but at the same time, then I kind of introduced some high violins to kind of give you this ominous feeling that even though he wasn't really doing anything, he just, you knew that he could, I mean, he was that kind of character that even though he wasn't really doing anything that was out of line, or wicked or evil, you knew that he had the capacity to do so. And so I wanted the music to kind of mirror that. Not as much foreboding as just surrounding, more like surrounding. And then, of course, I introduced a little bit of the piano, because the piano was going into the motif that would soon be associated with Ginny. So the next thing that I wanted to approach was Ginny's character, played by Billy Wolf, who was excellent. She is a very good actress. I had never seen her before, but she was very good. And Ginny is a very attractive young girl, but she's obviously smarter than everybody else around her. And I think that in some ways people are ignoring her, or the fact that she's alone on Valentine's Day. But when Ginny's at home, I wanted to create a motif that kind of represented, of course, there's some beauty there, there's some sadness there, there's some dissonance, and like I said, also some distance. And so I wanted a tone of the piano to kind of have an icy feel and kind of a far away, distant feel, so that would mimic her where she was at. And then as she became more comfortable at home, settling in for the night, then I moved from that motif into a different motif on the piano that kind of now slows things down. She's slowing down, the motif slows down, it changes keys, and it starts to represent kind of a sinister tone that's happening in the room now. And so we start to introduce some other instruments back in with the piano at that point. So the last thing that I had approached was the final scene, and I can't tell you about the final scene. If you want to know about the final scene, you need to see the film. But what I can tell you is this: is that there were a lot of things really kind of going on in a sense of uh, perception, I think. And so a couple of the things that I really wanted to do was, the first thing that I did was I took a steel guitar and went down to one of the lowest notes I could find and tried to find a way to interject air into the steel guitar. So it felt like air was blowing through the strings, and to kind of give you this, undertone. That's kind of how I approached that. And then I wanted to create kind of a scratchy backbeat that would mimic what was going on and kind of set you up for what was about to happen. And so, what I did is I took and found piano sound that was closest to the strings that I could, and then I found a way to interject um, little beats along the way that it almost sounds like somebody's on the inside with a little tiny hammer beating the, like keeping time on the piano strings while the piano note is being held and played. I was really quite pleased with that sound. I really thought it worked really well in that scene. And then one of the last things that I also applied that I really liked was throughout the short. Actually, I had found a way. It took me a while to figure it out, but a way to take a cello and to actually have a pitch drop while you start at one note and then you drop the pitch of the note, but at the same time the top note that you were at stays the same. And so it gives you this kind of duality, which I wanted to create. I wanted a duality. I wanted that to exist, especially in the final scene and the things that's really going on. And then I wanted the music to, they don't say that things go bump in the night for no reason. I wanted there to be bumps, but then I wanted to come back out of the bumps and then bring the viewer back in again for the next scene. And so that's always the challenge, but I felt pretty good about the way that it worked, and Chris and I kind of ironed that out. And so at the end of the day, I thought the final scene was something that was, just unique to this short, and was pretty happy with it. So, lastly, I'd like to say that I really enjoyed working on this film with Chris. I'd always wanted to work with Chris. In the process, I got to reconnect with some old visions of some old horror and thriller movies. I got to see Billy act, and she was fabulous. And got to see John be really creepy, which was cool. And even though we had to do it rather quickly and we didn't have a lot of time to spend on it, it was really a lot of fun. It gave me a chance to really work on some things that I wanted to work on that were unique. And I really liked the story a lot. And I think that's the biggest thing is you always like to work on projects where the stories are really good and your director is a really good storyteller. And so anybody who could see this film wherever it's playing, I would recommend it. You won't be disappointed. It's a lot of fun and it's very interesting. Thanks, Chris.